So, the last 10 days have been pretty eventful, marred by absolute nonsense too. And don't you think it's interesting that whenever we have a week with serious events unfolding, we're always flooded with division? I don't think that's organic, and I believe it's one of the main reasons they push so hard for censorship and control over social media. They have to keep you distracted. The truth is rarely pure and never simple, but they see it as dangerous. And it certainly is, when the foundation to your agenda is built upon lies. And so tonight, we're going to go through some of the more important stories that caught my eye. Anyway, we have a new announcement from Klaus Schwab. He is stepping down as chairman of the World Economic Forum. He founded the organization in 1971, but has announced his departure and will transition to a non-executive role by 2025. More than likely, it's health-related, as he is pretty damn old. And so this transition is still pending approval from the Swiss government, which is weird in of itself because why would the government be involved at all? However, here's the real kicker. There's a rumor that apparently Klaus Schwab's family members might get a few promotions. Yes, you heard that correctly. Schwab's family members taking on high-ranking positions raises quite a few questions about the continuity of his dystopian vision for the world. Now, they are still looking for an official replacement, but World Economic Forum President Borje Brendi has been managing these responsibilities for the past year. So, one would assume he's on the short list. And as a matter of fact, I just saw an update from Tim Hinchliff, who has a little context on the situation, and I quote, "Klaus Schwab is not going anywhere. He is just moving from executive chairman of the World Economic Forum to the chairman of the Board of Trustees, which is a group of very powerful people." End of quote. So yeah, it seems that this guy, Borje Brendi, will assume the role as Klaus moves into the Board of Trustees. However, I still want to talk about his family for a moment, because I've known about his daughter, but the others, yeah, they're pretty new to me. So let's do a quick rundown. His wife, Hildy, oversees the foundation and award ceremonies. His son, Olivier Schwab, serves as managing director of the organization. And his daughter, Nicole Schwab, is a member of the executive committee and co-heads the platform to accelerate nature-based solutions, which is basically monetizing nature. Perfect. Now, critics argue that the family's continued influence raises concerns about transparency and accountability within the World Economic Forum. And well, there has never been transparency or accountability to begin with. So, really, not much is going to change. Now, I just want to throw this in here real quick, because I get the same exact vibes from Nicole Schwab as I do for John Kerry's daughter, Vanessa. They are both completely twisted. Well, their policies are twisted, which in turn makes them twisted as well. For example, Nicole Schwab is all in on the Agenda 2030 dystopian vision. Now, the reason I want to throw this clip in here is because most people have never even heard her speak before. So, here she is advocating for the Great Reset.
This crisis has shown us that, first of all, things can shift very rapidly when we put our minds to it and when we feel the immediate emergency to our livelihoods. And second, that clearly the system, I mean, you mentioned it earlier, that we had before is not sustainable. So I see it as a tremendous opportunity to really to have this great reset and to use this huge flows, of money, to use the increased levers that policymakers have today in a way that was not possible before, to create a change that is not incremental, but that we can look back and we can say this is the moment where we really started to position, nature at the core of the economy.
So let's continue with the Great Reset and World Economic Forum news because it's all related. So do you remember the COVID wannabe tyrant Melissa Fleming? She once spoke on a World Economic Forum panel and detailed how they worked with Google to censor important information.
It's educating, it's hopefully elevating the content that we partnered with Google, for example. If you Google climate change, you will, at the top of your search, you will get all kinds of UN resources. We started this partnership when we were shocked to see that when we Googled climate change, we were getting incredibly distorted information right at the top. So we're becoming much more proactive. We own the science, and we think that the world should know it, and the platforms themselves also do.
We own the science, and we think the world should know it. Yeah, they're simply flexing their power. It's a really chilling statement. We own the science. Anyway, she has a new video making the rounds. This clip is about 2 minutes long, but it's pretty important, and we'll talk about it after.
They also claim that the pandemic was planned or orchestrated as part of a globalist plot and a conspiracy theory known as the Great Reset. The World Health Organization is frequently painted as a global force for evil, too, which with detractors saying it's using its global vaccination program to harm people.
And I quote, a globalist plot and conspiracy theory known as the Great Reset, huh? Yeah, of course, it's a conspiracy theory that they wrote a book about, and the title of that book is The Great Reset. They've actually been calling it The Great Reset since 2014.
It'll let me sort of judge how we need to ration the remaining time. If you can tell me both your name and the organization you represent.
What we want to do in Davos this year in this respect is to push the reset button. Let me explain.
And on top of that, King Charles officially launched the Great Reset with a video presentation back in 2020.
We have an incredible opportunity to create entirely new sustainable industries, investing in nature as the true engine of our economy.
The current global crisis has disrupted every aspect of our lives, but it has also presented us with an extraordinary opportunity, a chance to reset and accelerate efforts to improve the state of our world.
Changing our current trajectory will require bold and imaginative action, together with determination and decisive leadership. In order to secure our future and to prosper, we need to evolve our economic model, putting people and planet at the heart of global value creation. If there is one critical lesson we have to learn from this crisis, we need to put nature at the heart of how we operate. We are on the verge of catalytic breakthroughs that will alter our view of what is possible and profitable within the framework of a sustainable future. We need nothing short of a paradigm shift, one that inspires action at revolutionary levels and pace. We simply cannot waste any more time. The only limit is our willingness to act. And the time to act is now.
Everything they claimed would happen during the Great Reset has come to pass, including how the pandemic offered a narrow opportunity to reset the global economic system, which is exactly what they're trying to do, which is, of course, to switch the world to a carbon-based currency. And finally, if we needed more proof, they even speak about this every single year at Davos and the World Government Summit. So it's almost as if it's not a conspiracy theory at all. It's just, a conspiracy, which is exactly what it is, a global coup. And it is for this reason, everyone's sharing clips of them admitting their plan and paying attention to what they actually say at their events. Well, that's the main reason for the push for global censorship of the internet. This is also a plan that was announced back in 2020. They call it the Coalition for Digital Safety. The fact is, they've always planned for a tight grip around information. And the reason is because the plan cannot work if people point out the absurdities and tyrannical nature of their agenda. So, with that said, the EU just came out with a new plan for this Orwellian reality. They have a new structure for it, and get this, it's been dubbed the European Democracy Shield. And yeah, that's simply inversion of reality tactics, as this is not democracy at all. It's authoritarianism.
The threat of disinformation and foreign interference is more serious than ever.
The aim of all this is to divide our societies from within.
The enemies of our democracies are manipulating information to sow division. So we must step up our action with a European Democracy Shield.
An ambitious European project that focuses on the biggest threats from foreign interference and manipulation.
This new structure will track down information manipulation and coordinate with national agencies. The Shield will detect foreign interference, remove content with a stronger approach to AI deepfakes, and finally pre-bunk and build resilience.
They want to detect and remove online content from, as they say, once again I quote, Enemies of democracy. Yeah. All the petty tyrants love that talking point, don't they? And I quote, if the government, if any government, deems information too dangerous for the populace to know about, the populace deserves to know even more. And I 100% agree. However, what's the method to ensure complete control over information? Well, that's their stakeholder capitalism model, public-private partnerships. The same way Melissa Fleming was bragging about how global entities work with Google to censor information. They are going to utilize big tech as their weapon of choice and work out backroom deals to get it done. Just as an example, we just got this from Microsoft. On their new PCs, they will have an AI system capture everything you do on your home computer by taking constant screenshots. They call this recall.
How do we introduce memory, right? Photographic memory into what you do on the PC. And now we have it. So it's called recall. It's not keyword search, right? It's semantic search over all your history. And it's not just about any document. We can recreate moments from the past, essentially.
Here's how it works. Windows constantly takes screenshots of what's on your screen, then uses a generative AI model right on the device, along with the NPU, to process all that data and make it searchable, even photos. I got to try it out. I searched brown leather bag. It came up in visual search. There's no place on this page that it says brown leather bag. It just knows because it sees this brown leather bag. There could be this reaction from some people that this is pretty creepy. Microsoft is taking screenshots of everything I do.
Yeah, I mean, that's why that it can only do it on the edge, right? So this is like, you have to put two things together. This is my computer, this is my recall, and it's all being done locally.
And look, in my opinion, it would be incredibly naive to assume this would only be saved locally. So, yeah, this AI chatbot will recall everything you do on a PC. And of course, they will hand that over to the government on a whim. You can be sure about that. Essentially, for a low monthly price, they'll spy on you. Or perhaps it's a different monetizing scheme. For a one-time fee, we'll spy on you forever. You know, Orwell would blush. What a world. So what else do we have on the AI front? Well, OpenAI got rid of their safety team. If you remember their little boardroom shuffle trying to oust Sam Altman, this team came out and said that they are worried about a new development as it threatens all of humanity. Well, yeah, they got fired. They dissolved the team that focused on long-term AI risks, and this happened after the key leaders of the team accused OpenAI of prioritizing products over safety. However, there is an optimistic question we have to ask ourselves. Are they dissolving the safety team over existential threats to humanity? Or are they dissolving it due to disagreements with policing speech and censorship of information? As I said, that's a pretty optimistic question. I don't think they care about free speech at all, nor censorship. In fact, I think they are designing their AI to quell free speech, to censor individuals, and most importantly, to lie. Just as an example with a different company, Facebook and Meta were training their artificial intelligence with scientific journals, and then they shut it down because, as they claim, it was producing misinformation. Yeah, they input scientific journals and didn't like what the artificial intelligence determined, and it's probably because it would give correct answers for questions regarding, I don't know, biology perhaps? As we know, the social agenda takes precedent over facts. So, in the grand scheme of things, the threat to destroying humanity is not going to get in the way of their fourth industrial revolution, the Great Reset, or Agenda 2030. I mean, after all, our worst case scenario is actually their best case scenario. And the reason is because they want less people. They all seem to follow this Malthusian death cult of overpopulation. So, the threat of extinction probably doesn't worry them that much, you know? Anyway, back to OpenAI. The safety team said this before being let go. And I quote, "Superintelligence will be the most impactful technology humanity has ever invented, and could help solve many of the world's most important problems. But the vast power of superintelligence could also be very dangerous, and could lead to the disempowerment of humanity, or even human extinction." End of quote. So we have disempowerment, or on the other hand, extinction. What a choice. How nice. However, as stated, it's also about controlling humanity as well. So why don't we talk about the disempowerment angle for a moment? In fact, we have some updates from the godfather of artificial intelligence, Geoffrey Hilton.
Yes, I'm very worried about AI taking over lots of mundane jobs. And that should be a good thing. it's going to lead to a big increase in productivity, which leads to a big increase in wealth. And if that wealth was equally distributed, that would be great. But it's not going to be. In the systems we live in, that wealth is going to go to the rich and not to the people whose jobs get lost. And that's going to be very bad for society, I believe. So it's going to increase the gap between rich and poor.
He says, and I quote, "I'm very worried about AI taking over lots of mundane jobs, and that should be a good thing. It's going to lead to a big increase in productivity, which does lead to a big increase in wealth. And if that wealth was equally distributed, that would be great, but it's not going to be, and that's going to be very bad for society. My guess is between 5 and 20 years from now, we'll have to confront the problem of AI trying to take over everything." End of quote. Now, what's his solution to this big problem? Well, universal basic income, of course.
So to be clear, you think that the societal impacts from the changes in jobs could be so profound that we may need to rethink the politics of, the benefit system, inequality,
Absolutely, yes.
universal basic income?
Yes, I certainly believe in universal basic income. I don't think that's enough, though.
And a little background. Geoffrey Hinton, the godfather of artificial intelligence, quit Google to warn about AI dangers. And he predicts that universal basic income will be needed to address job losses, and of course inequality caused by AI. Hinton actually went and advised the UK government on this, stressing that artificial intelligence will increase wealth, but mainly benefit the rich, leaving displaced workers vulnerable. Ah yes, the Yuval Harari line, the incoming useless class. Now, they are really presenting this as a binary choice, become irrelevant or become a serf. And the reason is because they will make universal basic income dependent on whether or not you conform to government initiatives. Digital ID, social credit score, carbon output, healthcare, etc. In the end, you will be entirely dependent on the government to live a normal life. And if you dissent, it can all be taken away from you in a moment's notice at the push of a button. Now, I've recently argued with universal basic income advocates, and when I explain my position to them, they say, well, if there's conditions put on it, then it's not really universal, is it? And no, it's not really going to be universal. The government names projects all the time with inversion of reality. Just look at bills like the Inflation Reduction Act. It has nothing to do with reducing inflation at all. In fact, it increased it. Same thing applies with this. They'll call it universal basic income because it's a selling point. And they know that most people aren't going to bother reading the fine print. So, my message is trust the government at your own peril. That's all I can say. However, how is everything connected? Well, that's going to be through digital ID. Yes, this is the new system they're proposing. And this right here is from Wide Awake Media. And I quote, "The unelected head of the EU, Ursula von der Leyen, asserts the need for EU-wide digital ID." And I quote again, "A digital ID that any citizen can use anywhere in Europe to do anything from paying your taxes to renting a bicycle. However, once your digital ID has been connected to the incoming CBDC, which of course will be programmable, you won't be able to rent a bicycle or participate in society at all if the unelected technocrats in charge decide that you have not been obedient enough. For whatever reason, it doesn't really matter. Maybe you didn't get all the required medical initiatives, if you know what I mean. Maybe you expressed the wrong opinion on social media. Or maybe you had the audacity to criticize the totalitarian regime. Make no mistake, if digital ID and CBDCs are allowed to take root, unelected technocrats will be able to impose any arbitrary conditions they wish onto you to determine whether or not you can participate in society. In other words, obey or perish, death or slavery. What a choice. Now, Australia is already cooked, as their government just passed the Digital ID Act to make sure it becomes mandatory. We should all fight against this with every fiber of our being. And so, what's the reason we should all fight against this digital ID? Well, the proposed new system all hinges on the world adopting it. It is the linchpin to the entire thing. It ties everything together. The CBDC, carbon taxes, surveillance, smart cities, 15-minute cities, social credit systems. All of it hinges on that aspect. So, if you avoid digital ID, you avoid the digital prison. Okay, moving on. Let's talk about the deep state Pope, just for a minute. And I quote, "Pope Francis has come out against efforts to control America's borders, arguing that attempting to stop the invasion at the US-Mexico border would be, and I quote, sheer madness." He also claimed that the migrant has to be received, as he was surely flanked on both sides by the US State Department. Now, he also called conservatism a suicide pact, which is hilarious considering the other side perpetuates assisted suicide programs for people in their mid-20s, eugenic-style experimentation on children. On top of that, they push people to have abortions at all costs and actually advise them to never have children. They also commonly refer to humanity as a plague on the earth, which needs to be controlled and culled for the sake of the environment. And a side note, this is also the quote-unquote Pope who got the Vatican to work with the Rothschilds on inclusive capitalism, which of course is just Klaus Schwab's stakeholder capitalism rebranded. This is the same Pope who wants people to give up their rights for the climate agenda. And now he's an open borders advocate, which of course has nothing to do with his support from George Soros or Alex Soros and, of course, the Clintons. So my question is, who is pulling the strings? Certainly not divinity, that's for sure. Okay, moving on once again, let's get into some war updates. Now, Iran's leader is dead after a helicopter crash in the mountains. Now at first I thought this could be an assassination, however I did see some videos displaying the deep fog, so it's really up in the air. And I just realized that's probably not the best way to describe a helicopter crash. Up in the air. Okay, well, whoops. Anyway, I can't say definitively one way or the other. And I'm not gonna say that I do, because I don't know what the truth is. However, I will say, and of course this is a hypothetical, but if I was planning a hit, just like that, I would wait for a moment with environmental factors as a way to maintain plausible deniability. It's a logical move, you know? It's quite easy these days to infiltrate critical systems, so it's very possible. I knew this was going to be bad right away though. I was visiting family and casually saw the breaking news alert describing it as an incident and a rough landing, and I laughed out loud. He was definitely dead. And on top of that, it is pretty interesting to see people in the political sphere and American randoms on social media offering condolences and all that nonsense. This dude was terrible. I mean, his nickname was the Butcher of Tehran from Mass Executions. He's probably killed more of his own people than anyone else has, so forgive me if I don't give a shit either way. Now, with the question of whether it was an accident or deliberate assassination, personally, I don't think it even matters. Although, of course, I want the truth, but yeah, I don't think it matters. The fact is that everyone is going to use this situation to their advantage, and create whatever they want out of it. It's not just a means to an end situation, it's a means to war type of situation. And that's exactly what I'm expecting, escalation in one way or another. For example, we could see a power vacuum emerge and widespread destabilization within the country, as you know, everyone fights for power. Or they could install someone even more radical. Oh yes, it's possible. And even though I believe we're already in World War III, it could go hot in a matter of weeks or months, you know, depending on what shakes out. However, it is pretty interesting that Iran came out with a story recently claiming they officially have nuclear weapons, and then boom, the helicopter goes down. So perhaps hacking is to blame. Again, I have no idea. There's a lot of new tools that are going to be utilized in warfare in the coming years, things that we cannot even imagine. We are going to see man-made horrors beyond our comprehension, that's for sure. Oh yeah, and then the head of the Iranian intelligence service in Loristan, well, he was assassinated on Tuesday. So that adds a little spice to the whole situation, doesn't it? However, let's move on to another sign of the chaos. China dumps $53 billion of US bonds following its joint statement with Russia about moving away from reliance on Western countries. Swiss economic expert Claudio Grass said this, and I quote, "It is a wise decision to diversify away from the US dollar. Gold has outperformed US bonds by 75% since 2021. In addition, the US dollar has been used for decades as a political weapon, and of course with arbitrary confiscation of assets due to pressure from the US government. It is obvious that Western civilization is being destroyed by their own corrupted and rotten political system." End of quote. And let me read that last part one more time. It is obvious that Western civilization is being destroyed by their own corrupted and rotten political system. End of quote. Well, damn. Damn. Now, before the war kicks off, every nation moving into the BRICS system will dump US bonds and destroy the US dollar. And as a result, this whole situation has backed everybody into a corner. The BRIC nations have been backed into a corner by the establishment's idiocy and corruption, which has destroyed the power of the dollar and its viability as the global reserve. Now, the US dollar as the global reserve is the only thing holding the West together. And so, when they dump the dollar, in turn, they back the US and NATO into a corner as well, of course leaving war as their only option. And so, of course, regardless of what you and I think, this is exactly how US politicians and military advisors see this unfolding. But let's move on to something else. More chaos. So, from there, we have some interesting news out of Africa, which oddly enough is playing a major role in the global war already. I think it's pretty strange that the United States is moving out of bases in Africa while Russia and China are moving into the region. This is especially true relating to Niger. So, Wagner forces from Russia have been in Africa ever since that little coup, and Ukrainian forces have been in Africa targeting the Wagner forces, and this has been happening for months. You can actually see a clip of some of the fighting on the screen right now. However, I say all that just to add some context, but there was a coup attempt in the Congo, and 3 Americans have been detained. And I quote, 3 Americans were among 50 assailants arrested in Congo on Sunday, during a failed coup that included an attack on the presidential palace. And so this coup attempt was led by self-exiled opposition leader Christian Malanga, and it began around 4 a.m. as gunfire rang out in the capital. However, it was nipped in the bud, and Malanga was killed at the presidential palace. So, that guy's son was one of the 3 U.S. citizens arrested following the attack. Those who were captured are facing interrogation by specialized services of the country's military. Interrogation by African military. That's not going to be a fun time for them, to say the least. They will be tortured, and with near 100% certainty, they will be killed. And to be fair, I am speculating about that one, but come on, they are probably going to be killed, unless they are important assets. So we'll see. Also, just as a side note, there have been videos coming out of Chinese business owners running slaves in Africa. You can see a little bit of this on the screen right now. And also, there's been ongoing genocide of Christians in Africa as well. Those videos are far too effed up for me to show you though. And I guess that's all I can say. Some dark things are happening, as is typical of the region, to be honest. Alright, so I have one more story. The EPA warned of cyber attacks against water utilities in the United States, and are warning the U.S. government to reinforce the nation's drinking water.
The Environmental Protection Agency warning of increased cybersecurity attacks on America's drinking water. We found out more about how the attacks are happening and what Texoma water utilities are doing to prevent them. International cybersecurity attacks on America's drinking water are on the rise.
Now, critical infrastructure is always going to be targeted during war. And this right here is a huge problem we face, especially with our current media. How do we tell what's a hostile act from a foreign government and what's a coordinated effort to exert control over the nation domestically? That right there is a pretty tough thing to decipher these days. And so when I saw this warning, the first thing I thought of was this clip from Davos. The World Economic Forum openly talked about how they could use water systems as a way to convince citizens to give up control of their lives and, of course, give up their rights. You are going to hear them lament that COVID did not work, climate change did not work, but everyone understands the necessity of clean water. So they are shifting focus to that area, which means our nation's water supply will implode just like everything else they touch.
Only as healthy as our neighbor is on our street, in our city, in our region, in our nation, and globally. And did we solve that? Like, did we actually manage to vaccinate everyone in the world? No. So highlighting water as a global commons and what it means to work together and see it both out of that kind of global commons perspective, but also the self-interest perspective, because it does have that parallel. It's not only important, but it's also important because we haven't managed to solve those problems which had similar attributes. And water is something that people understand. You know, climate change is a bit abstract. Some people understand it really well. Some understand it a bit. Some just don't understand it. Water, every kid knows how important it is to have water. When you're playing football and you're thirsty, you need water. So there's also something about really getting citizen engagement around this and really, in some ways, experimenting with this notion of the common good. Can we actually deliver this time in ways that we have failed miserably other times? And hopefully we won't keep failing on the other things, but anyway.
Okay, that's everything I have for you. I appreciate you spending some time with me this week, and yeah, stay tuned. Once again, this is HelioWave. If you like the content, like, comment, and subscribe. Share the video if you want to. If you're in a position to, consider subscribing on Locals or Subscribestar. As always, make sure you disobey those true fascistas, and yes, I do hope you have a good night.